Making history. Hello and welcome to our viewers in Korea and around the world. I'm Moon Ganyang and this is Arirang's special coverage of South Korea's second launch into space of its domestically produced space rocket, the KSLV-2 Nuri. Over 11 years in the making, $1.7 billion in development program, South Korea's new three-stage liquid-fueled KSLV-2 Nuri rocket currently stands on its launch pad at the Nuri Space Center down in Gohung at the southern tip of the country for its second blastoff, ahead of its scheduled 4 p.m. liftoff, this time carrying a rocket performance verification satellite and 4 cube satellites. Our team is down at the Nuri Space Center. Our very own Han Sung-woo has been following the making and lead up to the historic moments. Now, Sung-woo, what's left for engineers to do now that the rocket is fueled and ready to go?
Konyong, all that's left is blastoff. So 4 p.m., the fuel and oxidizers have been connected, have been injected into Nuri for blastoff. Blastoff will happen 4 p.m. That was announced just an hour ago. The Ministry of Science and ICT announced at the press center here in Naro Space Center, Gohung, Jeollanam-do Province, that Nuri's historic second launch will take place at 4 p.m. as initially planned.
It's a bit cloudy, but we see no chances of lightning or rain. Based on our various assessments, we've decided to go ahead with the launch at exactly 4 p.m.
Like you said, there have definitely been hiccups along the way, technical glitches, strong winds, most notably that technical glitch, the oxidizer level sensor, but that's been solved. And today, everything's indicating the launch will be a success. No rain, no strong winds with wind speeds at just around 5 meters per second, much lower than Nuri's threshold of 15. Taking that into account, the Launch Management Committee concluded this morning that final preparations for the launch would proceed as planned. And now here we are. The skies and sea have been cleared. Nuri's been injected with fuel and oxidizer, like I said. Its director has been removed and last-minute inspections are just about complete. In less than 20 minutes, South Korea's first entirely domestically developed space rocket will blast off into the skies, carrying with it 5 actual satellites this time, part of a 1.5-ton payload that includes a 1.3-ton dummy satellite.
Right, so we're a little bit over 15 minutes away from liftoff. I'm sure engineers have been looking forward to this moment for a very long time. Now, those engineers on the ground, what do they have left to do?
So what's left to do, actually, this is an extension of your previous question. I want to say that 10 minutes before liftoff, everything's computerized, so no longer in the hands of engineers. This is the beginning of the automatic pre-launch operation system. The launch is not, like I said, not in the hands of manual labor anymore, meaning the engineers cannot manually abort the system once it kicks in. Rather, the system will put a halt to the launch sequence automatically if it detects an issue before liftoff. Nuri will soar into the skies with power from 4 75-ton liquid fuel engines in its first stage, 1 75-ton liquid fuel engine in its second, and 1 7-ton liquid fuel engine in its third, all developed by Hanwha Aerospace. I'm sure you already know, Gonyang, but if successful, the launch will make South Korea the 7th country in the world independently capable of sending a satellite weighing over a ton into orbit using domestic technology. That's all I have for now, but I'll be back after the launch for more. Back to you, Gonyang.
Right, our Han Sung-woo with the latest on the Nuri space launch from the Kohung Space Center. Well, so that is a lead up to the liftoff. We have 15 minutes remaining until the liftoff of the second launch of the KSLV-2 Nuri. But the entire journey has been really 12 years in the making, as the first space rocket, this one, is developed entirely by domestic technology. The project to develop Nuri began more than 12 years ago. Our Ji-young helps us trace the developments from inception to today.
It was in March of 2010 that the government decided to develop the country's own rocket with no outside help. Specifically, the goal was to secure the development know-how to build a launch vehicle that can carry a 1.5-ton application satellite into low orbit. 6 years later, in early May 2016, the key to this project, the 75-ton engine, underwent its first test. It burned for 1.5 short seconds. By the end of May, burn time had increased to 30 seconds. 200 tests have been done since, with the goal of achieving at least 145 seconds. 2 years later, the engine reached its potential on the ground, and so it was time to launch a test vehicle. In this test, the single engine burned for 151 seconds, which was 11 seconds longer than the goal that day of 140 seconds.
Through today's test launch, we have confirmed that preparations for the development of Nuri are on course. The core technology and the hardest part of the project to develop, the 75-ton engine, was tested today.
This made South Korea only the 7th country in the world to have its own liquid-fueled medium to large-sized engine. But sending Nuri into space for the first time would take a total of 5 of these engines. When it lifted off in October 2021, the nation was transfixed. But in this first test, it felt a bit short. The 7-ton engine in the third stage stopped burning around 40 seconds too soon, which meant the dummy satellite did not reach the intended orbit. But just before the launch, a scientist had told me this was just the beginning.
Even if we don't succeed this time around, we will be gaining a lot of new technology. We can analyze the aspects where we succeeded and the ones where we didn't and improve on them to make the second one a success.
The second launch was already scheduled at that point for mid-2022, so scientists analyzed the problems and worked hard to fix them. And on June 9th, with fingers crossed, the third stage was attached to the rocket. The second launch was then planned on June 15th, but got delayed due to technical faults. The Korea Aerospace Research Institute canceled the launch after the sensor was seen malfunctioning due to a final pre-launch checkup at the launch pad in Naro Space Center in Kohung, and rescheduled the launch of its first indigenously made rocket for the second time ever on June 21st. We'll know whether it was a success or not about an hour and 45 minutes after liftoff. Ji-young, Arirang News.
Well, with the launch of Nuri scheduled for today, attention is now focused on the event being a successful one on the first go. But how exactly does the homegrown rocket make its way to space? Our Song Yu-jin guides us through the entire journey.
South Korea's first homegrown space rocket, Nuri, will take off on Tuesday for what'll be its second launch. Attention is focused on whether South Korea will become the world's 7th country that can launch a satellite into orbit weighing more than a ton. But what happens once Nuri is launched? The 200-ton vehicle is made up of 3 stages. The first, at the very bottom, will separate from the vehicle around 2 minutes after launch when it reaches 59 kilometers. The fairing, a shield that protects the satellites on board, will be deployed at around 4 minutes at an altitude of 191 kilometers. The Stage 2 rocket will break away at around 4.5 minutes, 258 kilometers above the Earth's surface. If everything goes as planned, Nuri will reach its target altitude of 700 kilometers at 14 minutes and 57 seconds. Then the separation of the third stage will begin, starting with the 180-kilogram performance verification satellite. It's a new addition to the launch, as the first try last year only included a dummy. The satellite will also include 4 smaller cube satellites, which it will shoot out to orbit. This will be the first time in history for a satellite to shoot out another satellite. And finally, about 2 minutes later, the 1.3-ton dummy satellite will separate at the same altitude. It will take about half an hour to assess whether both satellites successfully parted from Nuri. 송유진, Arirang News.
Well, for those of you just joining us, we are bringing you a live coverage of South Korea's launch into space of the first domestically produced space rocket, the second launch of the KSLV-2 Nuri. And I have live in the studio Professor An Jae-myung, Associate Professor of Aerospace Engineering from KAIST. Professor An, good to have you with us.
Good afternoon.
Now, I have news coming in from the National Space Center that PLO has just kicked in.
Okay.
10 minutes to, or less than 10 minutes to launch or liftoff. What does that mean?
Well, so before 10 minutes, actually everything is based on the automatic sequence, so the human interruption is not allowed. So actually the sequence will judge if the launch can be continued or they have to stop. So that means we cannot do anything and currently.
So PLO has kicked in, which means that the liftoff will undergo as planned, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Now, so this launch comes after, in fact, the rocket was erected on the launch pad last week because that was the first initial test that was planned to undergo.
Okay.
That was scrubbed just with hours to go until liftoff. Do you think today is the optimal condition for liftoff?
Well, so far actually the weather condition is favorable, and I heard that there is no specific technical problem. So I think that the condition is very favorable so far. So far so good.
What are some of the factors that will determine the success of a rocket launch like such?
See?
What are some of the factors that determine the success of a rocket launch like Nuri?
Okay, so actually, there are some kind of situations that can prevent the success of the launch, like the weather, and also there are some situations that the space debris. So that's very significant these days. So actually, the probability of the collision with the debris should be low enough. And actually, there is some probability of the struck by the lightning, and that kind of the issues should be cleared. And I heard that so far there is no such a problem.
Right. Just last October, we saw partial success of the launch.
Yep.
The Nuri KSLV-2 Nuri carried a dummy satellite, so it was able to reach a certain orbit, but it failed to place that dummy satellite in orbit, if I'm correct. Now, what is the difference this time, and what kind of factors were improved in this launch?
So actually, that was because of some failure in the supporting structure of the high pressure helium tank inside of the third stage. And I heard that the supporting structure for the high pressure tank was kind of revised in this time. And actually, the engineers worked very hard days and night to identify the cause of the problem, and they made it, finally figured out the measures to correct the problem in short time. So actually, they should be truly appreciated, and I think that they will make no problem in this time.
So what's different about this launch is also that there is an actual satellite, or in fact, there are 4 small satellites, am I correct?
Right. Yeah.
4 small satellites on that rocket, which that rocket will carry into space. Tell us a little bit about that.
So actually the 4 little satellite that is called as a CubeSat, and the CubeSat is also very small satellite implemented on cubes of the 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter and 10 centimeter. So that the cube is called as 1U, and today 4 CubeSats developed by 4 schools in Korea will be on board. And one is by 6U satellite developed by Joseon University. And 3 of the 3U satellite developed by Seoul National University, and KAIST and Yonsei will be on board as well.
Were you involved in the project?
Unfortunately, no. But one of my colleagues are involved in the project.
Right, so this will be a historic moment. We have just gotten an announcement from the site that we're less than 5 minutes away from liftoff. This is, again, a historic moment for Korea, as this is the very first rocket, as we've seen from last October, that we're seeing is a liftoff of a rocket that uses just Korean technology. So this is a rocket that has been built from scratch using just Korean technology. Now, Professor Ahn, if this does succeed in putting the payload or putting those 4 satellites into the targeted orbit, what would that mean for Korea?
Well, so it is extremely difficult to successfully develop a new launch vehicle. So once the mission is successfully completed, we have the capability to put more than 1 ton of the payload to the orbit based on a fully domestic technology. So I heard that only 6 countries, including Russia, United States, and Europe, and China, Japan, and India, have the capability, and we will become the 7th.
Right, and I'm sure all of us remember 2013 when we also were very aware of the liftoff of Nuri. That was another historic moment for Korea, as we did see our own rocket, being lifted off to space. However, that was with the help of the Russian technology. How much have we come from 2013 to now?
So Nuri was a 2-stage rocket, and the first stage was a liquid propulsion rocket that relied on the Russian technology, and South Korea only developed the second stage, which is solid propulsion rocket. But Nuri, on the other hand, is a 3-stage rocket, and all of these stages are liquid propulsion system, and most importantly, actually, we developed all of them. And in terms of the payload that can be put into the orbit, actually there are some difference. Nuri can put only the 100 kilogram of the payload to the low Earth orbit, but the Nuri can put 1.5 ton of the payload to 700 kilometer sun-synchronous orbit. So that's a huge difference.
Also on the payload is one verification satellite. What is that?
So the verification satellite, actually, in the previous launch last year, actually, we only had the dummy mass, which is called as a mass simulator. But in this, launch attempt, we have the verification satellite, performance verification satellite. Actually, that is used to verify the performance of the Nuri launch vehicle to put the payload to the orbit. And also, it has some kind of the subsystems that has been developed for new technology, and actually it also has the meaning of the verify that kind of technology that have been used to develop the satellite as well.
Were you on site last week when there was the first attempt of this Nuri liftoff?
Yeah, that's right.
So we're now about a minute away from liftoff. So when you were on the ground last week, when we were attempting for the first liftoff of the KSLV-2 this time around, what was the atmosphere there like? I mean, how do you think the engineers are feeling right now with a minute away?
Well, so actually, I myself was a rocket engineer at Kari between 1999 and 2004. And the majority of the development team actually who have been working for the Nuri was my colleague. And I'd like to thank them for their efforts and passion throughout the procedure of the development. And I think that now is about 10 seconds.
Yeah, so I think we're about
9, 8,
8, 7,
6,
6, 5, 4,
3,
3,
2,
2,
엔진
1.
점화. 26.
Liftoff.
누리호가 발사되었습니다. 비행 정상.
Wow. So apparently, so the flight is in normal operation. So that's good to hear. So it's a phenomenal sight. I was here myself doing the live cast for the first launch of Nuri, and I remember seeing a similar picture from then. It's really a phenomenal sight to be seeing this in Korea with our own technology. So
최대 동합 통과.
when will we know about? So we're now about less than a minute away from blastoff. What is it that we should be on the lookout for from here on forth?
So after about 2 minutes from now, so 1:27 seconds from now, actually the separation of the first stage will take place. And the second stage and the payload fairing separation events will take place in 233 seconds and 74 seconds. So actually we first have to check if all of these events went well. And the separation of the PV set, the performance verification satellite, is scheduled at about 15 minutes from the liftoff. And the separation of the dummy mass is scheduled in about 16 minutes from the liftoff. And actually, at that point, actually, virtually the load of the
일단 엔진
Nuri
정지 확인.
terminates. But
일단
actually,
분리 확인.
after that, even
이단
after
엔진
that,
점화
the
확인.
reception of the first, signals from the satellite should be checked as well.
Right. So the second engine, they have just confirmed that they have seen the firing of the second engine. Does that mean, is that good news?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so they have just confirmed on the ground, and we are hearing engineers applauding
Yeah.
from the site.
비행 정상. 고도 100km 통과.
Okay, so they have just surpassed an altitude of 100 kilometers.
right.
So that's also good news, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Yes. So your colleagues, I'm sure, on site are watching this with their breath held. How do you think they're feeling at the moment? I'm sure that you have your colleagues on the ground there as well. But what are some of the factors that they are on the watch out for?
So actually, as I mentioned, actually, there are kind of the series of the event, something like the separation of the stage and actually the ignition of the engines and completion of the engine, and also the separation of the satellite into the orbit. So the kind of the events should be successfully fulfilled. So actually, maybe they are the feeling, they are kind of the milestones that they are watching out. But at the same time, actually, when you are on site, actually, when the liftoff, the launch take place, actually, you can feel the vibration from the ground. Actually, that is kind of really breathtaking. Yeah.
Right. I remember speaking to my colleagues who were down there last time, telling me that they really felt the ground
that's
shake
right. Yeah,
like an earthquake,
yeah. It's
and that
like
was a phenomenal
earthquake.
experience. Now, we are just
비행 정상,
confirming
고도
that
200
the separation of
통과.
fairing took place, and what does that mean?
So the payload fairing is the cover that is protecting the satellite from the outer kind of the damage. So actually, when the payload fairing is separated, and it means that when the velocity and altitude is fulfilled and it's
엔진
ready
정지
to separate the satellite into the orbit. So that's good news.
Right.
이단 분리 확인.
So the stage 2 rocket has just broken away, I believe, and it's been about four and a half minutes. Stage 2 separation at 4.5 minutes. That's also
비행
as
정상.
planned.
As
고도
planned,
300km
that's right, yeah.
통과. 3, 2,
엔진 점화, 이륙, 누리호가 발사되었습니다.
What are we seeing? So if you look at the monitor, we are seeing what are we seeing on the monitor right now?
So that's just liftoff.
Yeah, so we are seeing a replay of the liftoff.
Yeah.
So about 5 minutes after blastoff, we've just heard that the stage 2 rocket has broken away as planned. So it's going fairly well so far.
Yeah, that's right. So from now on, actually, the ignition of the third stage should be done correctly, and the full duration combustion of the third stage is important, and that should be cut off at the right timing. I mean, when it satisfies the altitude condition and velocity condition as well.
So if we remember last time, so back in October, do you remember when it was that we actually detected that something had gone wrong? At which minute was that? Do you remember?
Honestly, actually, I thought that went well. I mean, until the president announced that, well, unfortunately, we could not make it fully, fully made the circulation of the satellite. And until that, actually, because I mean, we did not, detect any kind of the technical problems, and actually everything went well as planned. I was just a little bit nervous because I mean, how can I say, the duration of the third stage kind of burning was a little bit shorter than planned, but I thought that could happen.
So the duration of the third stage, how long should that take? Just so that our viewers know what's right, what to look out for this time.
So that is 500 and something seconds, and actually in last time actually that was about 40 seconds short. Yeah.
So
and
it was
actually,
40 seconds shy of the actual.
That's right. Yeah, and actually that means actually the smaller kind of the final velocity. Actually, the final velocity of the Nuri vehicle should be 7.5 kilometers per sec. Actually, if we convert it to a kind of the familiar unit, actually that amounts to 27,000 kilometers per hour. So actually, we know that actually the KTX, the high-speed train, is moving at the speed of the 300 kilometers per hour. So actually, that means about 90 times faster than the KTX. It is kind of the amazing speed.
Right, wow.
Yeah. But actually, because of this some very small amount of the shortage in the velocity, we could not make the full circulation of the orbit as planned. So that's why the third stage, the shortage in the third stage is making only the partial success.
So we're about 8 minutes after blastoff, and we are hearing that it has surpassed the 500 kilometer mark. Does that mean good news?
Good news, yeah.
Yeah. So it is traveling at an appropriate speed.
I think so. But
So what is another landmark time that we should be on the lookout for? When should we check back in with our Nuri?
So the kind of the important time is, I think, that 15 minutes and 16 minutes. So 15 minutes is the time point at which the PV set, the performance verification set, is put into the orbit. That is the most critical moment, I think.
So if everything goes as planned, at about 15th minute, so at about 4:15 Korea time, the Nuri will reach its target altitude of about 700 kilometers. Am I correct?
That is right. Yeah.
Right. So that's another point that we should be on the lookout for, and we'll be back right after this.
Okay.
Well, it's been 10 minutes since blastoff, and I want to check back in with our Han Sung-woo at the Nuri Space or NATO Space Center in Kohung. Now, Sung-woo, what a sight that was. I mean, Nuri blasting off into space. I imagine the NATO Space Center was in high spirits and currently is in high spirits right now. It's been around 10 minutes since blastoff. Where is Nuri at this moment?
Well, Gonyang, it's still flying, obviously, but what landmark moment we have to remember is that just before, check that, reaching 900 seconds, that's 15 minutes after liftoff. That's the key point we should be remembering. That's when the performance satellite holding 4 mini cube satellites will be separated from the third stage at Nuri's target altitude of 700 kilometers. And 70 seconds later, the 1.3-ton weight simulator or dummy satellite will be separated as well. As you said, 10 minutes have passed. Several minutes have passed since liftoff. So at this point, the rocket's first 2 stages, along with the payload fairing that refers to the protective protective sheath protecting the dummy satellite and the performance verification satellite, have all fallen off. Whether Nuri succeeds in its mission of sending them into orbit will be decided at around 16 minutes after launch, and this will be briefed by the Ministry of Science and ICT at around 5:10 p.m. at the press center here.
Sung-woo, I understand today's launch is somewhat of a miracle. Why is that?
It is, Kanyang. We can say it's a miracle because the launch that took place today itself, it was very, very unlikely up until last week, considering a technical glitch inside the rocket was addressed in just a couple of days last week. That's why we say it's a miracle. Luckily for everyone involved, especially engineers working in the front line, the problem was less complicated than initially judged. Authorities first postponed Nuri's launch indefinitely last Wednesday, one day before the previous launch date of June 16th, after detecting an error in the oxidizer level sensor in the rocket's first stage. Its readings static when they were supposed to change in value once Nuri was erected onto its launch pad. But the Korea Aerospace Research Institute late that night transported Nuri back to its assembly site from the launch pad for technical inspections the next 2 days and managed to come up with a swift solution, replacing just one key part of the sensor that was malfunctioning. There were widespread concerns at the time that a problem with the sensor itself, not the electric cable or terminal box near it, combined with the monsoon season, could delay the launch to autumn. That didn't happen though. Miraculously, replacing the sensor's core and not the sensor itself was enough to do the job, erasing the need for them to disassemble the rocket and allowing the country to launch Nuri within its alternative launch window, the last day ending this Thursday.
Right, it was really a nail-biter because the window was just until the 23rd and today being the 21st. I mean, amazing it is, and what a relief. I mean, Sung-woo, you and our team, you guys been traveling back and forth, a 12-hour road trip back and forth from Seoul to Kohung for the last week. So imagine another road trip there for the third time. I want to get to Yoon Suk-yeol administration's position on space development in general. The government's not shying away from entering the space race, are they?
Well, right, the Yoon Suk-yeol administration, I think Nuri is just the start, Gonyang. In fact, South Korea has even teamed up with the United States to expand their alliance beyond the Korean peninsula into outer space. According to the joint statement released during Yoon Suk-yeol and Joe Biden summit in May last month, the two allies will start by building on the Artemis program that South Korea, under the previous Moon Jae-in administration, committed to participating in. The Artemis program is a U.S.-led international space exploration program that aims to make manned lunar exploration possible by 2025 and construct a manned lunar base by 2028, and in the long term even prepare for missions to Mars. The two leaders also agreed at the time to foster joint research in space exploration and back the development of the Korean Positioning System, or KPS, Korea's own version of the GPS. Completion of the KPS would mean South Korea would have a steady supply of information regarding time and navigation location near the Korean peninsula. information essential to the fourth industrial revolution. And by the end of the year, the two countries plan on holding their third civil space dialogue as well and work towards a safe, secure, and sustainable space environment. I think we can say that Nuri's launch, along with the 4 launches lying ahead until 2027, can be an igniter, can be a catalyst for all these space developments that Koreans can look forward to in the future. Back to you, Ganyo.
All right, thank you, Sung-woo. We'll check back in with you later in the telecast. So it is a great program. So South Korea and the U.S. joining hands in space as well. And we are just finding out that in the 13th minute, 13 and a half, Nuri has reached its target altitude of 700 kilometers. In minutes from now, South Korea's homegrown rocket Nuri will be reaching its target altitude, or it has reached its target altitude, and we will know for sure whether this has been a success in the next half an hour or so. But how and when will we know whether the success or the launch has been a complete success or a partial one? Our Kim Do-yeon has the details.
43 minutes. That's how long after launch it'll take before the test satellite inside rocket Nuri reaches out to the scientists on Earth. Not in South Korea, but this first communication will be with the country's research station in Antarctica called King Sejong Station. It'll roughly be 100 minutes after the launch when the test satellite sends signals to the city of Daejeon in South Korea, where the Korea Aerospace Research Institute headquarters is located. After 12 years of development, 1 test vehicle launch and 1 full launch with a dummy satellite, it will only take this much time to know whether the launch is a success. But what would qualify the launch as being a success? The 180-kilogram test satellite as well as a 1.3-ton dummy satellite successfully being put into the target orbit of 700 kilometers above Earth. Then, for the next 7 days, continuous connection between the test satellite and the team on the ground. Once that stage is over, the test satellite has another objective. Inside are 4 small-sized satellites developed by university students in South Korea, which will be released into orbit each 2 days apart. The 4 universities being Seoul University, Yonsei University, Joseon University, and Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. These 4 will have their own roles to observe the Earth and its atmosphere.
We're developing a 30-centimeter cube satellite to observe fine dust over the west coast of our peninsula.
The biggest objective is to receive GPS signals in space to measure the atmosphere.
University students, the nation's aerospace scientists, and private companies. No matter which South Korean organizations they belong to, they all have one thing in common: to make this launch historical. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
So, Professor Ahn, we are just finding out that we have confirmed the separation of the dummy satellite. Am I correct?
Yeah, actually, I heard that there is we confirmed that the separation of the PV set performance verification satellite around 15 minutes, and also we also confirmed that the separation of the dummy mass, which took place around 60 minutes from the liftoff. So, actually, I think that now the Nuri has done everything that it has to do.
So what is left for us to really determine the success of this journey?
So actually, I think that the confirmation means actually the position, the altitude of the 700 kilometer, and the velocity subject to 7.5 kilometer per sec. Condition is satisfied, and that's why that is successfully separated at the right timing. And the remaining thing that we have to check is the communication between the satellite and the ground station. Actually, I think that there will be the first communication between satellite and the King Sejong station around the South Pole in about 42 minutes from the lift off.
Right. So in order for us to get a complete or final confirmation of success, we will have to wait until the 42nd minute where there will be a communication between a satellite and South Korea's Antarctic Research Station.
Yeah, that's right. That's right,
which we will have to wait. But according to you, our expert, you say that it's about 90% successful as of now?
I told you.
Right. So what happens to the CUBE satellites? I mean, what's the mission of that?
So actually, each CubeSat has its specific mission. So for example, the CubeSat developed by Joseon University, it has the mission of using the multi-band Earth observation capability, which is composed of the electro-optical observation. Also, it is using the mid-wavelength infrared, and also it is using the large wavelength infrared as well. So it's kind of the multi-band observation capability. Also, the CubeSat developed by Yonsei University, it has the mission of monitoring the dust. So it's kind of the environmental payload. And the other two CubeSat has also its own mission.
So they will be carrying out, each of them will be carrying out their own mission.
That's right. Interestingly, the four CubeSats are kind of embedded inside of the PVSat. And actually, each of the CubeSat will be released after 8 days of the liftoff. So actually, they will be released with the period of the 2 days, right?
Okay, so they haven't been released yet.
Not yet.
Not yet, so they will be. All right, so South Korean companies have launched themselves into space business to develop 6G communication and lunar exploration technology, which all this will be happening after the liftoff, and the liftoff will lead to the opening of a new chapter in 6G technology and of all sorts. The plan now is to increase South Korea's market share by developing giant antennas and multi-orbit satellites. Ian-jin explains.
A giant satellite antenna with a diameter of 27.4 meters is South Korea's National Registered Cultural Heritage number 436. In 1970, it became South Korea's first to provide satellite communications to 7 overseas countries. The Kumsan Satellite Service Center in Chungcheongnam-do Province, operated by domestic telecommunications firm KTSAT, has now grown into the largest of its kind in Asia, with 45 giant antennas and 5 satellites. With a network that covers 60% of the world, KTSAT provides high-speed satellite data, broadcasting, and marine communications, and has launched a space data business that combines artificial intelligence.
기술진들이 누리호로부터 받은 비행 관련 데이터를 정밀 분석 중에 있습니다. 데이터 분석에는 앞으로 약 30분이 소요될 예정입니다.
So it will take around 30
데이터
minutes.
분석을 마치는 대로
After data
추가 브리핑을
analysis,
통해서
we will give
주요
you
비행
additional
과정,
briefing to
성능 검증
tell you
위성의 분리
the
및
flight journey
목표
and
궤도의
the
투입 여부,
performance, as
그리고
well
향후
as if
지상국과의
it had
교신
reached
현황
the
및
target
계획 등에
and the
대해서
communication.
발표하도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much.
So we had to cut off our report because there was an announcement on site by the Ministry of Science and Technology on when it will be that they will determine the success of the Nuri's journey. And they said that it will take about half an hour to analyze the data after the communication has been done. So that is that. And joining me now is Wendy Cobb, Associate Professor of Strategy and Security Studies, U.S. Air Force School of Advanced Air and Space Studies. She will give us an analysis of the situation and a comparison of the situation here in Korea and in the United States. Wendy, it's great to have you with us.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, I remember speaking to you back in October as well, but I'd like to first start with this question. I mean, why do nations build national launch systems?
When the space era first opened up in the 1950s, a lot of it was about advancing international prestige and a country's reputation, particularly in the context of the Cold War. And so you had the United States and the Soviet Union really competing to demonstrate to the world whose country, whose government, whose style of governing was better. Of course, the development of all of this technology has advanced since then. We've found many purposes for space-based systems and space technology. And so while there is still an element of international prestige, because as you've been mentioning, there's only a handful of countries that can do this. This is a very difficult thing to do. And the fact that a country can do it is a really big statement. So I think South Korea should be very proud in this moment that this is something that only a few countries can say they've done. And so there is absolutely that element of prestige and reputation, but there's also a lot of economic development that comes from space technologies today. The space economy is growing both here in the United States and worldwide. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry with projections upwards of $1 trillion by 2040. And so while it still does have a lot of military governing communications capabilities, the economic input that this has is really important moving forward.
So how does the KSLV-2 stand in comparison to other systems around the world?
So, the Nuri is designed to take about 3 tons of payload to low Earth orbit. Then if you think about that in comparison to SpaceX's Falcon 9, which is the primary launch vehicle we're seeing here in the United States today, they can take about 3 times as much payload to higher orbits and even to Mars orbit. So, Nuri certainly isn't as powerful as some of the rockets we're seeing come online today. But it's absolutely a great start. You don't just start by building a super powerful rocket. You have to start from using those building blocks and getting the experience and figuring out what works. And so to the extent that you can get to low Earth orbit, I mean, that's a fantastic achievement in and of itself, because it really does set you down on this path towards a greater potential. Another big difference between Nuri and some of the other rockets we're seeing is the reusability. For many decades, we've used expendable launch vehicles where you get one use out of them and you essentially throw them away. What SpaceX and Blue Origin are pioneering are these reusable rocket systems. And so there's a lot of new rockets that are coming online. The Vulcan here in the United States. There's a new Ariane rocket being developed by the European Space Agency, and they're building on reusability. So that's another big difference. But again, you have to get these basics down first before you can advance into these more complex systems.
Now, Wendy, if you remember back in October, we called that a partial success because it failed to place the dummy satellite in the targeted orbit. What kind of improvements do you see from then and now?
In terms of performance, the focus, I don't think, was very much on improving performance, but on demonstrating that it can be done. So I think the focus between last launch and this one was really fixing the structural problem that contributed to the partial success last time in terms of reinforcing the third stage tanks, which is what caused the issue in the fall. And I think they've gone ahead and done that. And I think the fact that they were able to adapt and change and recover as quickly as they did, both from the fall and then from the technical issues last week, really says something about what that capability is and how knowledgeable and how skilled the workers are on the ground. These things are incredibly complex, and there are technical glitches all the time. And so understanding that and knowing that that's going to happen, I think it's really important to have that ability to recover quickly. And I think that's really what is impressive to me between fall and even last week to today, that they were able to pull that and turn it around as quickly as they did.
Now, finally, what does the future hold in space exploration?
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be thinking about space. The United States, as you mentioned just a little while ago, is really looking forward to its Artemis program of returning humans to the moon. Just yesterday here in the United States, NASA was out testing its Space Launch System, which is their giant moon rocket that's designed to help get us back to the moon. And they had their fair share of technical issues yesterday as well. And in fact, it was their second go at doing what they call a wet dress rehearsal in advance of a test launch later this year. So I think that's really exciting. SpaceX here in the United States is also working on its own system to get to the moon and eventually to Mars, Starship. There's several other companies here in the United States who are working towards human spaceflight. Blue Origin, ULA, Boeing has a Starliner capsule that'll be taking astronauts to the space station, hopefully in the near future. And so I think there's a lot in terms of this exploration paradigm in getting to the moon, hopefully within the decade. That being said, it's very difficult to time a lot of these things because delays happen. You come up to these unexpected issues. And so, I think there's a lot happening coming up, and even in terms of satellites with Starlink's, SpaceX's mega constellation, bringing communications and internet around the world. And so there's a lot of launches going on. I just saw one here in Florida just the other night, and they're happening very regularly and routinely. And I think that says a lot about making space a normal, everyday thing.
Wendy Cobb, Associate Professor at U.S. Air Force School of Advanced Air and Space Studies. Thank you so much for your insights today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, as Wendy explained, American aerospace company SpaceX leads the global commercial space launch vehicle market with its reusable rockets. South Korea also has plans to develop a reusable rockets of its own as a follow-up to the successful launch of Nuri. Although this is Nuri's second mission, it's not a reusable rocket and was partly rebuilt ahead of today's launch. Chung Eun-ju has more.
Falcon 9 is a reusable rocket designed and manufactured by SpaceX. Out of the 142 times it's been launched in the past decade, the Falcon 9 has succeeded in landing the first stage rocket 102 times and has been reused 82 times. Using a reusable rocket reduces launch costs by more than $7.7 million compared to using a new projectile. SpaceX's operations have expanded tenfold in the past decade, launching 30 rockets in the last year alone. The company also accounts for more than 60% of the global space launch vehicle market. Meanwhile, Europe's Arianespace, which once accounted for half of the commercial space launch vehicle market, has recently reduced its number of launches from 6 to 7 times a year to 3. Existing space launch vehicles can no longer compete against SpaceX. Subsequently, countries with advanced space technology are planning to develop new reusable launch vehicles before the year 2030.
Europe's Arianespace is also researching reusable launch vehicles to develop low-cost projectiles, and it seems that developing reusable projectiles is inevitable if countries that currently have advanced space technology are to maintain the commercial market to some extent.
South Korea's own launch vehicle, the Nuri, which is set for its second launch, is not part of the commercial launch market as it is used to launch satellites into low orbit. The South Korean government has announced that it will develop launch vehicles that can handle larger payloads as well as reusable rockets as part of next-generation development projects that follow up on Nuri.
The multi-stage combustion cycle method is used in developed countries and has high efficiency and adjustable reignition output. If applied to the first stage, reusing the projectile becomes possible, and if applied to the last stage, separating multiple satellites becomes possible.
A new space era is coming, and South Korea is hoping that the success of Nuri's second launch will not only allow the country's launch vehicle technology to become completely independent, but also open up the possibility of entering the global commercial space launch market. Chung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
Well, let's seek some more expert analysis. I have live with us Paul Yoon, ambassador of NASA's Solar System. Paul, it's great to have you with us. Now, Paul, so you did see with us the liftoff of Nuri, the KSLV-2, Korea's very own homegrown space rocket. Tell us about your impression. What was your first impression of it?
this is a pretty amazing accomplishment. We know that there are only few countries can actually do it. So it's just amazing accomplishment that in such a short period of time, Korea could reach that level of technologies. That's pretty impressive.
All right. Why don't you bring us up to speed on space rocket development in the United States and what NASA is doing as well?
Yeah, so I think I see about, it's just like a very well-established company like a SpaceX are doing pretty good. We all know that. Also, United Launch Systems, they are not only near the Earth, but they are sending the Perseverance rover to the Mars. So they're doing pretty good. But also, there's a company that, a commercial company looking for benefit, the commercial benefit, which is like a sending small satellite to near Earth orbit, like Rocket Lab. These are emerging too. But also, we know that another group like Blue Origin and then Virgin Galactic, they are in space tourism. They're very active. So it's a lot of things going on in the United States.
Right. So we are getting confirmation from the government here that the Nuri, the journey of Nuri has all gone as planned. So that sounds like good news, and we're looking forward to the first communication between the satellite and the Antarctic Station of Korea. Now, so the success of KSLV-2, which we are looking forward to the announcement in a little bit, what would that mean for the space rocket development here in Korea and for the global space rocket development?
So, traditionally a few countries, United States, and then the European countries, part of the European space agencies, and then Russia, and then China, Japan, India, they were dominating this launching development. But now, the success in the Korea, I think it means a lot because I think more countries will more likely try the same thing. I think that kind of encouraging other countries to try out the same thing too. That's what I expect.
But of course, as you mentioned, the Blue Origin and SpaceX, in Korea, we don't have commercial space flights like such. Do you think the success of KSLV-2 could be a starter to opening a realm of commercial spaceflight programs for Korea as well?
I think so too. I think that there's a lot of things we could learn what NASA did to the SpaceX. So by U.S. policy, actually, in space agreements, under space agreements, the NASA transferred spaceflight technology to SpaceX. And that's how SpaceX grows so radically. So I think Korea Aerospace Research Institute could do the same thing. They could transfer technology to a commercial company. Then I think Korea also can really foster a lot of the space flight companies coming years.
So I can expect myself to be out in space sometime soon. Am I correct?
Yes. I think you might see. I think space tourism will be more noticeable in the coming years. I think it's going to be more common.
Okay.
That's what I expect personally.
I'll take your word for it. So I look forward to a space journey myself. Now, so Paul, the development of a satellite launcher. So how can this development benefit satellite launchers?
So as I mentioned, Korea can transfer this spaceflight technology. So I think any commercial companies planning to offer this launching service, definitely now they're capable. But also commercial, the company and the organization planning to send a satellite, it's a good news for them because more competition, more companies are available means their price will go down. So launching costs will go down, which is very important because the lower cost in the launching will really accelerate space economy.
Right, and also, South Korea is also looking to develop or, to eventually build a South Korea satellite-based navigation system and a 6G communications network. Could you walk us through that? I mean, what does that mean?
Okay, so that's a very important question. I think you could think of that the backbone of the fourth industrial revolution. So, for example, I think by getting really a Korea position systems, you could accurately locate the positions and time accurately, which require for automated drivings. So it is a critical. So you could think of that as a backbone of the fourth industrial revolutions. That's why I think Korea now, I think Nuri is capable to go up to 700 kilometer altitudes. But I think the global navigation satellite system need to be placed in the geosynchronous orbit, which is about more than 35,000 kilometers away. So I think eventually Korea can do it. Then that will be very helpful to Korea's economical development in this era of the fourth industrial revolutions.
Absolutely. So this will be a key in the next 5 to 10 years. This technology, but of course South Korea has denied using the technology or benefits from Nuri into creating weapons. Of course not. But however, it would be capable of developing it to a military communication of some sort, could it not?
So I think one thing noticeable is I think the Nuri, I think I compare with two the launching system, which is one is by European Space Agency Vega, which is use solid fuels, and then Japan's Epsilon rocket. They use also rocket that was solid fuels, but this Nuri use a liquid fuel, which is more technologically challenging and then need more time to fuelings. So I think Korea's kind of consciously trying to make it it's not military purpose but rather civil purpose. I think I can sense it through the way they develop using liquid fuel rather than solid fuels.
Right. So the fact that Nuri is a liquid fuel propelled rocket means that it's more geared towards commercial use. Is that what you're saying?
I think so too. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Right. So what we're getting is that the KSLV-2 or Nuri has successfully reached its target altitude of 700 kilometers. It's completed its journey. So we're now just minutes away or seconds away from its first communication between the satellite and the Antarctic Space Station. Now, and we will let our viewers know because we're just seconds away from that. Now, what would that mean? That first communication, when that happens, what would that mean?
That means it's a success, and that's an amazing accomplishment. That's the only thing I can say. So right. I think that's a good sign. I think the future of the space exploration in Korea will be very promising then. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a beginning, and then I think Korea will eventually, this is a good foundation. Korea eventually will go, deep space exploration, such as go to Moon and then Mars, coming years. That's what I sort of expect.
Right. So I will let you know when that communication has taken place. But I know that South Korea is also working with the United States on a lunar orbiter and hopes to land a probe on the moon by 2030. Could you explain a little bit about that project?
It's under the Artemis programs. So NASA and then the international partners, we are, unlike Apollo missions, Artemis programs, we try to get a permanent human base on the surface of moons. So I think Korea is a part of the Artemis. Korea also signed up Artemis Accord. So I expect Korea will be more very proactive partners in our human effort to landing and then working on the surface of the moon. And eventually, that will be the foundation to us, help us go to the Mars and beyond.
Now, lastly, what's your forecast of this global race that's heating up currently into space? Do you expect it to heat up even more?
I think so too. I think there are two important issues. I think there are a lot of benefits in space. So one thing I see is the emerging space economy. We know that Morgan Stanley is estimating that within 20 years, the space economy will grow up to over $1 trillion, which is a very significant portion of the economy. So we know that more countries get involved. What are the motivation? Definitely the satellite-based communications and then internet service, we're going to be big portions, but also other sections, something like a civil aspect, like weather forecast, and then better management of the infrastructure using the satellite, and better management of the forest. there are a lot of benefit, definitely national security. So I think every country will be heading to space.
Right, I'm just going to have to stop you right there because we are getting news that they have successfully communicated with the Antarctic Sejong Station. So I think that means a success for the Nuri KSLV-2 liftoff of the South Korea's very first homegrown space rocket. And I'm very happy to end this interview with you, Paul, on this very successful note. Thank you so much for your insights. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for your insights.
Bye-bye.
So for those of you just joining us, we are bringing you a live coverage of the liftoff of KSLV-2 at Nuri, and we have just gotten confirmation that the satellite has successfully communicated with the Antarctic Space Station down in Antarctica, the Sejong Space Station, which means the Nuri's second launch has been a success. Professor An, explain to us, elaborate for us, what does this mean?
So we got the news that actually the Nuri reached the 700 kilometer of altitude, and actually maybe at that time maybe the engineers would know that velocity, if that velocity condition satisfies the condition for the successful circulation. But actually the final confirmation of the satellite should have been checked by the communication with the ground station, and that happened about 3 minutes ago. And actually the final confirmation of the Nuri program can be now announced, I think.
Really? Okay, so now engineers down there and your colleagues and fellows, they are now undergoing the data analysis of this. What are some of the points that they should be on the lookout for? What are they looking at? What analysis are they doing?
So actually, the data that we hear from the announcement are kind of limited. Actually, we know that actually the Nuri reached 700 kilometer altitude. We know that actually it satisfactorily separated the stages and fairing. But actually, we don't know. I mean, for us, don't know about the actual, what is actual thrust profile, what is actual the acceleration profile, what is the actual kind of the pressure inside of the combustion chamber, etc. So actually that kind of data, although that is not kind of affecting the success or failure of the Nuri itself, but actually that is kind of the valuable data for our improvement of the engine and the overall the system as well. So maybe they will be starting the analysis of that kind of the various data.
Right. So what we heard from the Science and ICT Ministry is that it will take about half an hour from the communication point for them to analyze the data that's been gathered from this communication. Now this data, so the first set of data that's been gathered or from this first communication, what will that encompass? Like, what will that contain?
So from the first communication, actually, that data is not very complicated, actually. So that is the data from the satellite saying that I am alive, right? So, but to make that signal, actually, the satellite should be circulating around the Earth and arrive at that point that can communicate with the pole, the South Pole, right? So actually, that means actually the circulation of the satellite is normal, right? And the orbit has been successfully created.
So now that we have satellites in orbit right now, these satellites, what can we expect them to function as? I mean, what kind of data do we expect them to bring us?
So the satellite has a couple of the subsystems that has been created based on new technology, including the thermal battery and some control moment gyro that is used to the attitude control of the satellite and some other communication system as well. So on the orbit, I mean, when the satellite is kind of perfectly stabilized, and the subsystem will kind of conduct their kind of own functions, and actually their kind of the result of the function will be communicated with the ground, and that will prove if the subsystems are kind of functioning well or not, and that is kind of the verification of the technology that has been developed in Korea for the satellite. Although that is not for the launch vehicle, but that is also kind of the new achievement that we made.
So as an aerospace engineer yourself, what does, today must be a landmark, historic day for you. You must be crying inside. What does it mean for you?
So yeah, definitely that is a huge achievement. After more than 12 years of the development, we finally made it. And so that is kind of the huge achievement that we became the 7th country that can put more than 1 ton of the payload to the orbit. That is a huge achievement. But at the same time, I would say that this is just the first step. This is the first step. As we know, actually the launch vehicle is the only transportation system that can connect the surface of the Earth to this space, right? And meaning that we could not, have our own launch vehicle so far means that actually we didn't even start the first step in kind of the space kind of the era, right? So having our own technology and having our own launch vehicle means we just take the first step toward this space. But that is just first step, and actually there are ways to go. We can do many things, many exciting things in space, because the space is limitless and there are many things that we can do.
Right. Well begun is half done. So we've begun this journey. I'd like to know again how this Nuri, this KSLV-2 Nuri rocket is composed. I'd like to know the components of Nuri.
Okay, so yeah, actually I brought this small model for the explanation. So Nuri again is the 3 stage rocket. So the first stage is here, and the second stage, and that is third stage. And so Nuri is 47 meter long. Actually, its diameter is about 3.5 meter, and actually the total kind of the mass is about 200 ton, and the first stage is creating about 300 ton of the thrust, which is the
first. So which part is the first stage?
So this part is the first stage. And actually the first stage is using the 4 units of the 75-ton engine clustered together. So 75 multiplied by 4, that makes 300 ton of the thrust. That is sufficient to lift this heavy vehicle up from the ground.
Right, so the 75-ton engine, that will be the heart of Nuri, right?
That's right, yeah. So what is surprising again is actually if you are burning the 75 engine, 1 unit of the 75 engine will consume about 250 kilogram of the fuel propellant per second.
Wow.
So the first stage of the Nuri will consume about 1 ton of the propellant per second. It's amazing, actually. So, and also in terms of the engine, actually, the engine is working in a very harsh and extreme condition. I mean, the temperature inside of the combustion chamber of the engine is more than 3,000 degrees Celsius. So actually, it is hard to imagine, but actually, the normal kind of the melting point of the steel is about 1,500. So actually, it is kind of working in a very harsh and extreme condition.
Right, harsh to say the least, if you will. Right, so at this point, I'd like to go back to the package, the report that we had to cut off about the commercial use and the commercial ramifications of the success of the KSLV-2 or the Nuri. South Korean companies, of course, have launched themselves into the space business to develop 6G communication and lunar exploration technology. And the plan now is to increase South Korea's market share by developing giant antennas and multi-orbit satellites. And this is key to the launch of the KSLV-2 Nuri. Our Ian Jin explains.
A giant satellite antenna with a diameter of 27.4 meters is South Korea's National Registered Cultural Heritage number 436. In 1970, it became South Korea's first to provide satellite communications to 7 overseas countries. The Kumsan Satellite Service Center in Chungcheongnam-do Province, operated by domestic telecommunications firm KTSAT, has now grown into the largest of its kind in Asia with 45 giant antennas and 5 satellites. With a network that covers 60% of the world, KTSAT provides high-speed satellite data, broadcasting, and marine communications, and has launched a space data business that combines artificial intelligence with satellite data. KTSAT plans to establish a multi-orbit satellite communication network equipped with low-orbit satellites at an altitude of 500 kilometers, medium-orbit satellites, and geostationary satellites at an altitude of 36,000 kilometers that covers the entire world by 2030. A terrestrial network is sufficient for 5G, but satellite communication is essential for 6G, which transmits 125 gigabytes per second.
Construction of the 6G system itself uses both terrestrial and satellite networks. That's why, without building both together, it'd be difficult to have the communication services expected from 6G.
SK Broadband opened the Yeoju Satellite Center in Gyeonggi-do Province in 2017 to receive overseas broadcasts via satellite and use it as part of its IPTV service. The Yeoju Satellite Center has 1 antenna that is 11 meters wide and 4 antennas with a diameter of 6.4 meters. These antennas are also used for deep space exploration at a distance of more than 1 million kilometers. Equipped with a reflector that's 35 meters wide, the antennas will be in charge of ground equipment related to the lunar probe scheduled to be launched in August and Korean lunar orbiter deep space communication. The global space industry market is worth around $340 billion, but the size of South Korea's is only about $2.7 billion. As growth of the global space industry is expected to double over the next decade, South Korea is setting its sights on thoroughly preparing related businesses. 이은진, Arirang News.
So, Professor An, I'd like to pick up on the commercial or the business side of this liftoff of Nuri, or the success of the KSLV-2. We mentioned the 6G communications and other commercial use means. What are some of the everyday benefits that we can expect from the success of KSLV-2?
So the technology that has been obtained during the development of the KSLV-2 that will be used for the other kind of the industries as well. I mean, as I mentioned, that the very high kind of the reliable kind of material and kind of the guidance and control kind of the technology and other kind of technology that can be used for other kind of industries as well. That is one of the benefits. And actually, in terms of the commercialization, if we can, use the launch vehicle to provide the launch service to the to put other countries' satellite into the orbit, maybe we can make profit by doing that service. But actually, this Nuri launch vehicle should be kind of improved from the current status. So actually, we should be able to make sure that it is more reliable. We just complete just first success, and the kind of the history should be accumulated. And also, we have to improve its capability so that it can carry the heavier payload to the farther destination, to the Mars, well, to the moon, well, to the asteroid as well. So the kind of the reliability and also the capability improvement, that's what we have to do to make it actually commercial.
So compared to other, let's say, a powerful space powerful nations, how does that compare with the rockets or satellite launchers of those nations?
So the capability of the Nuri is similar to that of the how can I say? So one of the very similar kind of the launch vehicle currently available in the world is the launch vehicle called the Vega. that is developed by ESA and manufactured by Italy. So it is the capability of putting about 1.5 ton of the payload to the orbit. But in terms of the kind of economics, actually, the cost to create one unit of the Nuri would be higher. So it is very critical that we take some measures to reduce the cost. So I mean, the reusable kind of technology that you mentioned, and also some other kind of measure like the streamlining of the operation, and also the better engine, also the better kind of the structure, the technology. So there are many ways of reducing the cost of the Nuri. That is kind of something that we have to do as a homework.
Right. So, what are some of the? What's left now for those engineers who've been working on Nuri? I mean, what will they be? For instance, from next week, what will their next assignment be?
Well, so next week, maybe today, they will be happy with the success of Nuri, and but from day 2 or day 3, actually, they will continue their kind of work. And actually, as I mentioned, that the kind of the continued kind of the repeating of the kind of the manufacturing, also launching of the Nuri. Actually, there is official program to do that from now on for about 5 years. So the engineers will kind of complete kind of repeat the manufacturing and launching of the Nuri about I think that 4 times from now on. But actually, that program has the objectives. One objective is to make sure that the reliability of the Nuri vehicle is kind of improved. And another objective is, you mentioned about the commercialization, but actually the technology that has been obtained so far should be kind of transferred to commercial kind of private sectors. That is kind of the secondary kind of the objective of that program.
Right. So, so engineers will still be working. You don't even want to give them the rest of the week to take off. You want them to get to work from tomorrow. Very harsh on your colleagues.
Okay.
So there's another 5 years of work that needs to be done. So what you're saying is that we'll see many more liftoffs of Nuri. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So actually, we will continue kind of the repetition of what we have done so far. But during that phase again, so the reliability and kind of the technology transfer will take place.
Right.
And we are more kind of ready for the commercialization of the launch service.
Right. So we have actually kicked off our very own space development from from today. Now, at this point, I'd like to check back in with our team down in Kohung at the NATO Space Center. Our very own Han Sang-woo, I'm sure very excited down there, is down there at the NATO Space Center. So, Sang-woo, tell us what the ambience there is like after a very successful first communication between the satellite and the Antarctic Space Station.
Well, Kwon-young, you just said it right there. The Antarctic Space Station, very first sign has been communicated, and we're happy. The crew is happy. I'm sure the journalists at the press center behind me are happy, but I don't want everyone to be too happy because another procedure awaits. As you know, 18 hours from now, well, the launch was at 4, so maybe 17 hours from now, we'll have to see whether the performance verification satellite is actually working. So working and putting them into orbit are 2 totally different things, and we'll only be able to find that out tomorrow, the 22nd, 17 hours from now. And then a week from now, on the 29th, don't forget that in the performance verification, there are also 4 mini cube satellites developed by Seoul National University, Joseon University, Yonsei University, and KAIST. These 4 satellites will be released into space at a 2-day interval between each other. That happens in a week, and we'll have to see whether they operate accordingly as well. So we're happy. I'm sure you're happy. And so far, everything's been working, but we'll just have to see. I don't want everyone to be too positive. We just have to be, because we're journalists, right, Kwon-young? We're journalists. We have to see what goes on moving forward from now.
Well, yeah, I am one optimist. I am one happy journalist, and you are one very prudent journalist, so I would say. So, yes, we are very happy. It looks like it's been a success. We'll wait for that announcement by the Ministry of Science and ICT. However, like you said, Sung-woo, we will be waiting for that performance verification satellite to be verified as working 17 hours from now. Our Han Sang-woo from NATO Space Center, thank you. So, Professor An, as our Han Sang-woo just said, so he just, rained on our excitement and cheer. So he says final step awaits, and we need to verify that the performance verification satellite needs to be verified as completely working 17 hours from now. What is he talking about?
So what he mentioned is correct. So actually the communication with the Antarctica station means, as I mentioned, that I'm alive. But actually, the second kind of communication with, I think that with the Daejeon station is confirming the satellite is kind of the functioning properly as planned, right? But in terms of the Nuri, actually, I mean, thinking that Nuri is the launch vehicle, actually is kind of the functioning, I mean, of the putting the satellite into the target orbit has been completely satisfied perfectly, right? So I think that I can now kind of thank our kind of colleagues at CARI, and I think that I'm very proud of them. Yeah, that they made it. Yeah, but what he mentioned is right. So we have to wait to make sure that the satellite is functioning properly.
Yeah, I mean, we as a nation, we're all very proud of our engineers, our scientists, everyone who's worked on Nuri. It's just some of our journalists, including our Han Sang-woo, they're very prudent. They're sometimes harsh on our scientists. But yes, so a final step awaits, and the performance verification satellite needs to send a signal saying that it is well functioning, and we hope that will be a success as well.
I hope so.
Right. So it'll be roughly in the morning hours of tomorrow.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and of course we will get data from that, and those set of data will also be a valuable set of data for engineers and scientists to analyze.
That's right. So that's kind of the data from the satellite that we launched from our own technology. Everything that we receive is kind of the valuable.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, in essence, everything from scratch has been made with our very Korean technology from scratch to now. Did you expect a success this time? Because a lot of the scientists and engineers that I've spoken to at CARI and everywhere, they were pretty confident of the launch this time.
Well, so actually, I was kind of confident, but I didn't want to say like that, because I mean, as I mentioned, that uncertainty is everywhere, right? But I was kind of confident. I mean, based on my kind of the communication with my colleagues at CARI, and they were pretty confident about their kind of the work. So that's what I felt.
Right, and also come August, there is another project that we'll be seeing that's called, and in fact we will be picking up our Nuri, which we'll be talking about later. But we want to go back to on site where they are making an announcement on the success of the Nuri launch, and this is the Minister of Science and ICT.
Honorable fellow Koreans, I am the Minister of MSIT Lee Jong-woo. Today, I stand here to announce a historic event, not only in the history of science and technology in the Republic of Korea, but the history of Republic of Korea. 2022, June 21st, today, Nuri was launched at 16 hours and it had gone into the target orbit and it has successfully separated its satellites and it is now placed on the orbit. The Korean homegrown satellite has been a success and I would like to announce this. Fellow Koreans, today the skies and the aerospace of Republic of Korea has opened up. And we have made a great achievement. In 1993 June, we had launched the first science satellite to the open air, and it has been 30 years exactly. In Korea, we have made the satellite with our own hands, and we have become the 7th country around the world to be successful in this. From now on, until 2027, the Korean government will launch 4 more additional launches and to sophisticate and the performance as well as the safety of the satellites. And in August, we are going to launch Nuri, which will be the first moon orbiter, and we will also participate in the Artemis program with the US, and thus we will enhance the capacity of aerospace program of South Korea. And the Korean government will also provide institutional and systematic support to this regard in order to prepare for a new space era, and we will form an ecosystem of ourselves. We have successfully launched and developed this program with our own hands, and I would like to thank all the Korean researchers and the company people from other companies who had chipped into this project sincerely, and I would also like to thank the Korean people who had cheered on us sincerely. The government, together with the people of Korea, we will walk into this journey, this great journey into the aerospace development. Thank you very much.
So that was the South Korean Minister of Science and ICT, Lee Jong-ho, announcing officially the success of the launch of KSLV-2, the Nuri. Now, Professor An is here with me. So there you have it. You know, you have it officially by the Science and ICT Minister declaring the success of Nuri. How do you feel?
Cannot say anything, but again, so I'm really proud of my colleagues at KARI and also the partner companies who made it. And actually, this success was made of their kind of the blood and tears and also sweat as well. I think that they made it. And actually, again, that is just the first step toward our journey to space, right? So now we have secured the transportation system to access to space, right? So now we can do more things, more exciting things in space. Yeah.
Right, so a new chapter of the space era awaits Korea.
Right.
I want to pick up on the question that we left off right before the announcement of the science minister. So in August, we have a new project regarding an explorer on the moon, Nuri. What is this, and what are some of the assignments that we have in terms of space development as a follow-up to Nuri?
So Nuri is the first lunar probe of our country. So that is the lunar orbiter. So that is a very challenging program, and actually I hope that would be successful as well. But unfortunately, the launch vehicle that is carrying Nuri to the moon is not ours. That is the Falcon 9 launch vehicle of the SpaceX. And hopefully, maybe the next kind of the space exploration mission, maybe that will be the lunar lander mission, can be kind of done based on our kind of the own launch vehicle. Maybe there can be some kind of the improved version of the Nuri, right? So that should be take place.
Right, and for follow-up assignments of the Nuri or the KSLV-2, as you mentioned earlier, you talked about working on the improvements on the reliability of the Nuri, the satellite launcher.
Right, reliability and also capability,
Right.
And also cost reduction as well.
And reducing the cost of the rocket. All right, well, that was a wonderful performance by our Nuri, and thank you very much for your insights, for staying all throughout our coverage, and congratulations to you and your fellows, and to you and your engineers as well, and thank you for your coverage.
Thank you very much.
And that was our live coverage of the special launch of our KSLV-2, the Nuri, and I'm happy to end on the note that we can tell you that we have successfully seen the successful launch of the KSLV-2 Nuri and the successful first communication between the satellite and the Antarctic Space Station here. All right, that's the end of this live coverage, but stay tuned. Our live newscast comes at 7 p.m. Korea time.